Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebekah Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan Elrom.
In our top story, the Jerusalem Post has reported that the Biden administration not only knew of the Iranian strike on Israel in advance, but allowed the attack to happen under the condition that it remain within limits. It was reported that Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan acted as an intermediary between Tehran and Washington, informing the Biden administration of the imminent attack. In the aftermath of the unprecedented strike, the White House immediately warned Israel against retaliation for the Iranian strike, urging Jerusalem to take the win after warding off hundreds of Iranian missiles and drones. President Biden announced that the United States will not participate in any counter-strike against the Islamic Republic and appealed for Israel to exercise restraint. In the meantime, the hardline Shiite regime continues to advance its nuclear weapons capabilities and to threaten to wipe the Jewish state off the map.
World leaders called on Israel to exercise restraint after Iran sent swarms of weaponized drones, cruise, and ballistic missiles to attack the Jewish state. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned Israel that retaliatory action against Iran is barred under international law. The group of 7 nations, which consist of the United States, Italy, Germany, Japan, France, the United Kingdom, and Canada, vowed to strengthen their cooperation to end the war in Gaza by working towards de-escalation. The G7 called for an immediate Israeli ceasefire. In addition, they pledged to increase aid to the Palestinians in need. The group also discussed designating the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization and the possibility of imposing additional sanctions against Tehran's drone and missile programs.
Israel's war cabinet has called to respond to the Iranian attacks against the Jewish state, despite overwhelming international pressure for restraint. The 5-member team of top Israeli officials agreed that a retaliatory attack is necessary to deter further Iranian escalations. Several Israeli officials have said that Jerusalem will respond, but that strategic decisions, including the timing and scale, are still being discussed. Israel's foreign ministry released a statement saying, just like any other country, Israel has the right to defend itself in the face of Iran's massive attack.
Several Arab Gulf states provided valuable intelligence to Israel regarding the Iranian attack. According to the Wall Street Journal, the cooperation extended beyond just sharing intelligence, but also involved the use of missile defense systems of the cooperating countries. The Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan downed many Iranian drones over its airspace en route to Israel. The other Arab states that do not have diplomatic ties with Jerusalem allowed the use of their airspace and provided radar to track the incoming Iranian missiles. The report stated that in some cases, Arab militaries took an active role in intercepting the threats to help Israel.
Israel's Missile Defense Organization has been hailed as a huge success after it defended the Jewish state against a massive Iranian attack of hundreds of missiles and weaponized drones. Moshe Patel, the head of the IMDO, said that nearly 40 years of investment in long-range missile defense, which was inspired by former U.S. President Ronald Reagan, has finally paid off. Tehran recently fired over 300 suicide drones, cruise, and ballistic missiles on the Jewish state, 99% of which were intercepted. Israel employed the use of the Iron Dome short-range defense system, the Arrow long-range missile defense system, and David's Sling mid-tier system, which combats drones and cruise missiles to fend off the Iranian strike.
The radical Islamic Republic of Iran has bolstered the presence of its violent morality police on the streets of Tehran in an attempt to quash any uprising by the Iranian people. The movement to topple the Ayatollah's tyrannical regime has gained traction among the oppressed citizens of the fanatic Shiite state. In a bold act of defiance, a stadium filled with Iranian soccer fans jeered and booed during a moment of silence for a commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and 7 other terrorists that were killed in a recent Israeli airstrike. Now, this is just the latest example of the growing resistance to the iron-fisted rule of the hardline Islamic government. Following the October 7th Hamas genocidal attacks on Israel, Iranians were furious when a Palestinian flag was raised during a soccer match. The crowd demanded that it be taken down and began to chant the name of the former Shah of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, who was overthrown by the mullahs in 1979.
Assassinated Iranian General Mohammad Reza Zahedi was involved in the planning and execution of the October 7th genocide in Israel. The Middle East Media Research Institute obtained a document written by the Coalition Council of Islamic Revolution Forces, which describes Zahedi's involvement in the massacre of 1,200 people in Israel and the kidnapping of around 250 others to Gaza by the Hamas terror group. Memory translated the document, which clearly states that Zahedi was directed by Tehran to plan and execute the massacre. The statement was translated from Farsi into English and distributed to American officials with the explanation that it is an admission by a senior Iranian regime figure that Iran did indeed have a hand in the October 7th attack. In related news, the London Times has obtained a letter from Iran to Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar detailing the transfer of hundreds of millions of dollars to the Gaza-based terror group ahead of the October 7th massacre.
Saudi Arabia has boldly accused Iran of instigating the war in Gaza to prevent Arab states from normalizing ties with Israel. Iran funded, trained, and directed Hamas, its proxy terrorist army, to attack the Jewish state on October 7th, igniting the war in Gaza. A member of the Saudi royal family told Israeli media sources that Iran is a nation that endorses terrorism and the world should have curtailed it a long time ago. Riyadh was in talks to establish diplomatic relations with Jerusalem before the October 7th massacre, but the normalization issue was put on hold when the Israeli military Operation Iron Swords began in Gaza. Senior Saudi officials insist that a potential deal with Israel is still being considered, especially after the recent Iranian attack.
The Southeastern Asian nation of Indonesia is in talks to normalize relations with the Jewish state. Negotiations to establish diplomatic ties between Jerusalem and Jakarta have been ongoing over the past several months, and Israeli media is reporting that an announcement is imminent. Israel has reportedly offered to withdraw its opposition to Indonesia joining the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, otherwise known as the OECD. Matthias Cormann, the Secretary General of the OECD, stressed that Indonesia's acceptance to the organization is conditional upon its diplomatic relations with all members of the world body, including Israel. Indonesia is the largest Muslim-majority country in the world.
The Jewish state is mourning the loss of 14-year-old Benjamin Achimeir. The young teen was shepherding his flock of sheep in the biblical heartland of Samaria when he was attacked by Arab terrorists and brutally murdered. Hundreds of volunteers came to the scene to assist in the search, which lasted from Friday afternoon through the Jewish Sabbath. Unfortunately, the boy's brutalized body was discovered, sparking outrage from the Jewish communities in the area, who have faced incessant attacks on their families from the surrounding Arab villages.
Jews around the world are preparing to celebrate the Passover holiday, which will begin at sundown on Monday night. This week-long biblical festival commemorates the liberation of the Jewish people from slavery in Egypt, as told in the book of Exodus. The Passover story details 10 biblical plagues which afflicted the people of Egypt, culminating with the death of the firstborn son. The Israelites were commanded to put lamb's blood on their doorposts so that the angel of death would pass over their homes. This year, the symbolism of the Passover holiday is even more meaningful to Jews and Christians around the world, as 134 hostages remained enslaved by the Iranian-backed Hamas terror group in Gaza. The plight to secure the hostages' freedom will be at the forefront of everyone's mind during the Passover Seder as we memorialize the exodus from Egypt and the miracles God performed to deliver his people from Egyptian slavery and bring them to the promised land of Israel.
Prayers for divine protection, as written in the book of Psalms, was the number one item searched on Google during the recent Iranian attack on the Jewish state. As Israelis braced for the imminent impact of over 300 weaponized drones, cruise, and ballistic missiles, they collectively petitioned the Almighty to protect them. The poetic prayers in the book of Psalms, attributed to King David, are filled with songs of thanksgiving and pleas for deliverance. The custom of reciting psalms in times of distress is deeply rooted in Jewish tradition. The Jewish people experienced a great miracle during the Iranian missile onslaught, where God protected Israel from an unspeakable disaster. After the unprecedented attack, many Israelis recited the Jewish prayer for gratitude known as Birkat HaGomel, which praises God for his saving mercy. This prayer is reserved for anyone who survived a life-threatening experience. We at Israel Now News would like to wish all of our viewers a healthy and happy holiday.
Chag kasher v'sameach.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Lior Haiat. He's the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Lior, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, it's all-out battle, 6 months now at war, and it seems like being in the foreign affairs in Israel is a pretty tough job. How we holding up?
First of all, it is a tough job, but personally, I think that's the most important job we have. And when I do is talk to audiences around the world and explain why Israel is defending itself, why it's so important to never forget what happened on October 7, and why it's so important to release the 134 hostages that are still held by Hamas terrorists in Gaza.
We see that the Biden administration is becoming a lot tougher on us. It looks like Israel's becoming a partisan issue. We're seeing a lot of elements of the Democratic Party, not all, of course, but some that have come out very strong against Israel, accusing us of incredible blood libels and genocide. What do you think is going to happen moving forward with the bipartisan nature of support in America?
First of all, I think that the American support for Israel is part of our national security. It's one of the pillars of our national security, and we have to do everything in our power in order to maintain the bipartisan support. I do think that there is a change in the American support for Israel. We'll have to work harder, even harder, in order to maintain it. We do appreciate President Biden and the American people's support for Israel since October 7th. And we know that there are differences and there are things that we don't see eye to eye on, but we have to understand that we have to work together, Israelis and Americans, in order to achieve the goals of the war, which is eliminate Hamas, release all the hostages, and change the reality in a way that the Gaza Strip will no longer be a threat to Israel or to the Israeli citizens.
One of the initial successes from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is exposing UNRWA as a terrorist organization run by the UN. But recently, a lot of countries are now saying, look, there's no alternative to UNRWA. We have to fund it, and they're starting to fund it again. What's the alternative to UNRWA?
UNRWA is being used and abused by Hamas in order to use their infrastructure, the humanitarian aid, and to give jobs to the terrorists. Even if there isn't an alternative, and there is, and I'll talk about it, you shouldn't give money to UNRWA because this money goes to Hamas, and this money goes to the people that keep attacking Israel and the Israeli citizens. There are other alternatives. There are other humanitarian organizations. Most of the humanitarian aid that goes into Gaza today is not going through UNRWA, and UNRWA is part of the problem. It won't be part of the solution, and it won't be part of the future of the reality in Gaza. And the sooner we'll find another way to give the humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza that need it, that's going to be better for the Palestinians and going to be better for our war against Hamas.
One of the bright spots that I see in our foreign diplomacy is Bible-believing Christians. They're rallying for the state of Israel. We saw 1 million people last month in Brazil. We saw 500 people with flags at the ICEJ. We see people rallying in Africa. Christians are really getting involved with standing with Israel, making the case for Israel. How is the foreign ministry working with our Christian brothers and sisters around the world?
First of all, you're right. We get a lot of support for Christians around the world that understand that standing with Israel is standing with the Western world. And it's standing with a Judeo-Christian alliance, and when you defend Israel, you actually defend the morals and the values of Christianity. This is a basic thing that I think that the whole world should understand. I think that in the long run, we have to focus on the things that unite us, and there are a lot of them. I think that the basis of our cultures are united, and the more we'll put an emphasis on that, the better for both sides.
We see that public opinion is starting to turn on Israel. Countries are turning against Israel, yet we still have to put a lot of attention into the north with Hezbollah. How are we going to work to keep public support for Israel as the war progresses into the north?
According to polls we have in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Western world societies are standing with Israel. People have to be reminded day after day that this war started because of the atrocities of October 7 massacre, that thousands of Palestinian terrorists infiltrated Israel. They murdered and massacred and executed and raped thousands of Israelis. And if we don't fight and eliminate Hamas today, we are going back to October 6th, which means ceasefire and waiting for the next October 7 to occur. And this is a reality we cannot allow. It's true towards Gaza, and it's the same thing towards Lebanon. If we don't change the reality in the northern border of the state of Israel and demanding that the world will go back to the resolution 1701, which means that Hezbollah forces cannot be next to the border with Israel, we'll have the same thing that we had in the south, in the north, and we'll have to fight again. There are two options for that: either a diplomatic solution or a war. We want the diplomatic solution, but if there won't be a diplomatic solution, there's no other way.
Lior, there are tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Remember what happened on October 7. Remember that it's not just Israel that was attacked. It's our culture, our morals, our values, our freedom. And if it's not Israel today, it's the Western world tomorrow. So standing with Israel is standing with the entire Western world.
Thank you, Lior, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein, wishing you a happy Passover. Now back to the studio.
And now the truth from Zion.
Mahmoud Abbas, also known as Abu Mazen, has been one of the most prominent figures in Palestinian politics for decades. He replaced the infamous terror leader Yasser Arafat as head of the Palestinian Authority in 2005. He has maintained his grip on power, controlling the lives of Palestinians living in Judea and Samaria, while Abbas is portrayed as being a more moderate voice in comparison to Hamas. His public remarks time and again reveal his true character as an anti-Semite and a terror leader. Throughout his time in office, Abbas has been candid about his desire to weaken the Jewish people and deny their history and connection to the land of Israel. While pursuing a doctorate in the Soviet Union in the 1980s, Abbas wrote a thesis that questioned the extent of the Holocaust. His 1982 dissertation, titled The Other Side, The Secret Relationship Between Nazism and Zionism, was a PhD paper which blatantly denied the Holocaust of 6 million Jews and promoted insane blood libels, such as the Zionists worked with the Nazis to get Jews to immigrate to what was at that time British Mandatory Palestine. Just 2 years later, in a study based on his dissertation published in Arabic, Abbas cited known Holocaust denier Robert Farison and promoted the idea that gas chambers and crematoriums in Nazi Europe were not for murdering people, but they were only for incinerating bodies out of concern for the spread of disease and infection. Fast forward 40 years, about a month before the October 7th massacre, during a conference with the Palestinian Fatah Party leadership, Abbas tried to explain that Jews were killed during World War II because they brought it upon themselves. Abbas went on to claim that the genocide of Jews had to do with usury and money lending, and that the Holocaust was not about anti-Semitism. His statements were condemned by the international diplomatic community, but only 2 weeks later. He's an outright supporter of terrorism against Jews through his policies. Under his leadership, the Palestinian Authority provides financial incentives to individuals and families of terrorists who commit acts of violence against Israelis. This policy is called pay to slay. There's no greater incentive to violence than cold hard cash, and that is what the Palestinian money supports. While the international community likes to pretend that the Palestinian Authority is a modern democracy, the PA continues to be anything but democratic. Abbas is an autocratic ruler. He has remained in power because he has prevented free and fair elections. The 88-year-old tyrant has been the PA boss since 2005, with political stagnation oppressing the Palestinian people. After 16 years, President Abbas called for elections in May of 2021. Campaigns were in full swing and voting sites were being mapped out when he canceled the May 22nd vote just weeks before it could materialize. And as usual, he blamed it all on Israel, saying it refused to allow East Jerusalem Palestinians the opportunity to vote. But nobody was buying it. Even other Palestinian factions like Hamas and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine spoke out against the injustice of Abbas's actions. Analysts believe the issue came from politics within Abbas's own Fatah party. Following the debacle, members of the Palestinian Legislative Council were arrested for any and all criticism of Mahmoud Abbas. In mid-November of 2023, just over a month after the October 7th massacre in which 1,200 people in Israel were brutally murdered and some 250 taken captive into Gaza, the Palestinian Authority's foreign ministry, under the direction of Mahmoud Abbas, dangerously distorted history again. It released a statement saying that it was not Hamas that attacked the Supernova Music Festival, but rather it was Israeli army helicopters that gunned down Israeli civilians on that terrible day. This was an obvious lie since Hamas terrorists filmed and proudly posted on social media the massacre they carried out. But that meant nothing to the propaganda machine of Abbas's Fatah party. Mahmoud Abbas's Palestinian Authority is obviously a danger to Israel. Nevertheless, he is being touted by the administration of U.S. President Joe Biden as the best available option to govern the Gaza Strip following the current war. Israel is opposed to having the Palestinian Authority take control of Gaza, and the reason is simple.
Mahmoud Abbas is not a partner for peace. He is a Holocaust-denying, murder-inciting terrorist. As long as he leads the Palestinian Authority, there will never be peace.
This would be a recipe for disaster because the aging Palestinian Authority president continues to support and encourage terror attacks against Israelis. Up next, the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
Today we're excited to be in Migdal HaEmek in the north of Israel, and what we're going to see today is the opening of a new home that's going to be assisting people who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. The ICEJ has been privileged to help with the establishment of this beautiful home, and we're here to bless it as the people begin to come.
I will tell you just a bit about this house, and first of all, thank you very much for your generous donation and help us to open that place. It was needed before the war, and it was started to establish before the war, and the war is coming, and now the needs is like here, really. We have 3 psychologists with different fields, like most about the trauma, most about EMDR, stuff like that. We have amazing crew of instructors that living here 24/7 and making all the non-formal relationship treatment, which is how to find the balance again, how to find the safe place again.
Since 1980, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem has been a voice of Christian support for Israel and connected the global church to the land of the Bible. Headquartered in Jerusalem, the ICEJ has taken action to stand with Israel by caring for Holocaust survivors, helping Jewish families return home to Israel, providing bomb shelters, fighting anti-Semitism around the world, and by inviting Christians to discover Israel for themselves.
First of all, we are extremely privileged to be here today. Your nation deserves to live in peace and security, and
Amen.
we hope soon houses like that will not be needed anymore. But right now, we do everything to enable this Israel, this nation, to return back to normality as soon as possible. And we want to do the best what we can to help in that.
Amen.
It's a privilege for us.
Mazal tov. So we opened this house less than a month ago. We have an agreement with Ministry of Defense, and we see many people that came from that field, from post-traumatic syndromes. Sometimes it's from recent time, from that war, and sometimes it's from different wars. That war is just resonated and brings it back to life sometimes. We see people in high level of anxiety. Something starts going wrong. They start having some post-traumatic symptoms. Psychoeducation is also part of it, to normalize it, to normalize what's happening, and to build the progress together, to explain how we treat with that, how we treat with post-trauma syndrome, and helps them to believe that they have the force to pass it. I feel blessed, and to know the Christian embassy, and to be able to see how many amazing things you're doing around the world. I feel that you are solid ground in a very shaky time for Israel in general. For me as Israeli citizens, for me as Jewish, you are very solid ground for us. And I want to thank you a lot.
After Hamas brutally attacked Israel on October the 7th, 2023, the ICEJ has been actively standing with Israel and her people through advocacy and urgently needed aid projects. Now is the time for Christians to turn their love for Israel and the Jewish people into real action as never before. Your donation will help deliver bomb shelters to at-risk areas, provide necessary supplies for first responders, care for evacuees with food, shelter, clothing, and trauma care, and will eventually help rebuild these devastated communities. Visit ICEJUSA.tv to donate online or call 1-800-910-6355 and give your generous gift today.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebekah Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan Elrom, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.